We know what the difference is between the polka dot jersey, the green jersey, and the yellow jersey, and the most aggressive rider. But for folks that are used to watching football or basketball or soccer or baseball or you name it, it's just a very different set of rules, very different types of competition, right? And this whole idea of like, oh, I'm a fan of this team. When does this team play that team? It's not a simple thing to answer. So essentially what we're trying to do is take the formats that every other professional sport in the world uses and apply it to cycling in a new and novel way.
Joining us in the studio today is a successful entrepreneur and visionary in the field of healthcare and genetics. He got his start, however, in a bike shop in Northern California. From there, he went on to co-found some of the coolest companies in the healthcare space that have revolutionized prenatal genetic testing. He's currently focused, however, on trying to reinvent the sport he loves most, cycling, as he's just launched the National Cycling League, aka the NCL. Please welcome Paris Wallace. Hey, Paris.
Hey, how's it going? Great to be here.
Oh man, good to see you. So honored that you took some time out of your day. Paris, where are you calling in from in the world today?
New England. I'm actually a snowbird, so we're just moving back up to the Northeast so we can start getting some Northeastern miles in.
All right. So snowbird, where do you split your time between?
Between New England and Miami. Yes, we're in Miami
Okay.
during the winter and up here for the summer.
Dude, congratulations on Miami, the first NCL. We saw each other just down there recently, and what an epic event. Congrats.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it really exceeded everyone's expectations. We had 20,000 people there. The format really worked. We had a safe race. The athletes had a great time. Spectators had a great time. So it's exactly what we wanted to be able to launch this thing.
I saw a few crashes though. I mean, it got, there were some rubbing, right?
Yeah, there were, but fortunately having a completely closed course and taking some new safety, we actually developed safety barriers specifically for our style of racing that I think prevented anyone from getting seriously injured.
All right, well, we're going to talk more about that later in the show. You're familiar with the show, so we usually start out with the easy stuff, like, where'd you grow up and all that stuff. So let's go there. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, Marin County, California, the home and birthplace of mountain biking.
How long did you live there before you moved out east?
Yeah, I was there until I went to college out in Western Mass.
What did your parents do when you were growing up?
I actually, a pretty humble background. My mom, single parent, disabled, and so she basically just raised me full time, which I am much better for.
All right, so only child, no brothers and sisters?
I have one younger brother. He is 10 years younger than me. So, for my formative years, I was an only child, and I think that
Yeah.
shows in my personality for sure.
Where is your younger brother in the world? What does he do?
He is actually at my house down the hall right now on a conference call. Believe it or not, he is an international filmmaker explorer. So
No
he's
way.
on the board of the Explorers Club and travels the world making anthropological based films. So most recently, he was making a film about sea turtles down in Central America, and he's planning an expedition to literally go diving for treasure in Menorca.
Dude, that's pretty cool. Have you thought about recruiting him to do content for you?
He actually has done quite a bit of content for
Oh,
us.
good.
Some of our best performing things, and he was in Miami as well, doing a docu-series style content during the race on the Miami night.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Paris, what kinds of stuff, like activities, were you into as a kid?
Yeah, it's funny. I have always been into cycling. In high school, we had a requirement that you had to play sports, and I got a note from our science teacher who also led the mountain bike team that I could do that as opposed to play varsity sports. And so, a group of us would go out and ride on Mount Tam. And the big claim to fame is I actually went to Kate Courtney's high school. And so I was
Oh,
on the same team as Kate Courtney. She was, she's several decades younger than I am. But yeah, that was the sport and that was my passion.
can you remember your first mountain bike or your first legit mountain bike?
Oh, I remember it well. It was a chromoly red Bridgestone. And I remember I got the first RockShox lowest end shock with my cantilever brakes. And, it was like, wow, finally riding with some suspension. And the difference was just night and day.
Let's stay in that sort of moment as a child, loving that bike. Were you a gear junkie or did you just love riding?
Both. My first job was in a bike shop, Mount Tam Cycles in San Anselmo, California. And I
Yeah.
both did sales and I was in the back, kind of apprenticing to learn how to be a mechanic, and eventually became a mechanic there.
Prior to that, did you read the magazines? Did you ever sort of fantasize about being a racer or did you have like heroes in sport back then?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mountain bike action. I subscribed to it at the time. I remember it. We had a PO box and the excitement when it was time for it to come out, and I'd read it cover to cover. Some of the folks at the time, Johnny Tomac, Tinker Juarez. I remember, really idolizing those folks, and then going to some races in Lake Tahoe and getting to meet them, get autographs. It was a big thing.
Did you ever think about racing yourself?
I did. I was pretty academically involved too, and so I was very focused on my studies, and so sports never really was my focus. I did trials a little bit, so I was actually went to Sea Otter in probably 1997
Oh, no way.
and competed in the amateur junior trials there. Dabbled a little bit. I did a couple very amateur downhill races, but that was the extent of my professional cycling career.
Did you say 97-ish you were at Sea Otter?
Yeah, probably 97, 98, 99.
That's awesome. My third day at SRAM in 1995, I went to Sea Otter.
And it's still kicking. We had
Yeah.
we had teams out there, and it's bigger and seemingly better than ever. It's amazing.
It was huge. I was out there a couple weeks ago, and yeah, the weather was fantastic. The crowds, the events, it was amazing. Yeah. Um, Paris. Okay, let's fast forward to the bike shop days. So you loved riding. You were able to ride instead of playing, ball sports, which is super cool. Did you think you were going to just work in the bike shop the rest of your life, or what was your career path at that point?
Yeah, it's funny, as I mentioned, from a pretty humble background, disabled single mother, so I didn't really have a lot of examples of what a career look like, or even a job. She was on disability, so didn't really have a sense of that. So I ultimately started working at the bike shop during high school to help support the family, and obviously help support my growing bike habit. And between wholesale and actually getting a steady paycheck, was able to upgrade from that Bridgestone eventually. And I think I pretty quickly saw that there was an opportunity, that I was good at stuff, that I could kind of sell, that I could understand what was going on, that I had a lot of drive. I never wanted to leave when the shop closed because I was still working on stuff, and the idea that you kind of leave it and move on. I think I've been OCD from the beginning. And at some point I kind of made the realization, I think I could do this, and I think I could build a business like this. So I guess I've kind of found an entrepreneurial spirit very early.
Let's talk about that because you actually created your own business sort of out of that bike shop and actually started to be successful. What was that all about?
Yeah, so when I was, I guess, a junior in high school, I had been working in the bike shop, really understood it, and at that point was doing some of the ordering and cash management and some of the other things for the shop, and I was like, I think I can do this. And so came up with an idea with two of my friends to start an online bike store. This was, late 90s, kind of the first internet tech boom. So we called it dirtmart.com. It was an online retailer of bike parts. And we went over. I'll never forget. We dressed up in our nicest clothes, and we took the ferry over to San Francisco to get our business license that we needed to be able to get wholesale status with our distributors. We started working with a big wholesaler. We probably sold SRAM. We probably sold
I'm
a few of your
sure.
components, but the big one was the Timbuktu bike messenger bags out of San Francisco.
Oh yeah.
So we were one of the first folks to sell them online, and we figured out this cool way that you could customize it because there's 3 panel bags with 3 colors, and so you could actually mess around with the different colors and see what it looks like, and then order it directly from our shop. And we'd drop ship it. It would come to my house, and I had a label maker. We'd put it in the bag, put the label on it, ship it out to folks. And there was one day that I was in school, and I came home and checked my email, and I had made more money on dirtmart.com while I was at school that day than I did working monthly at the bike shop. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm never getting another job. I'm only working for myself. I'm only going to be an entrepreneur.
And what happened then to Dirt Mart?
Like many things, I went to college, and basically let it lapse. We shut it down because me and my 3 amigos went different ways and decided we couldn't
Yeah.
continue doing it. Plus, I don't think my college would have been very excited for me getting these packages and reselling out of my dorm room.
Had to be a hard decision though, right? I mean, do I go to college or do I continue with this successful, you know, cottage industry that's this new startup in the .com region, the start of the internet? Like, how did you decide to give it up?
Yeah, it's funny. Like when you put it that way, it seems like a hard decision, but I was such an unsophisticated 17-year-old. I didn't really understand the trajectory of e-commerce at the time. And, my goal from probably inception, my mom was like, "You're going to college," and I was lucky enough to get in and get a scholarship and knew that that was kind of my direction forward. So it was never really
Yeah.
an option. I didn't even kind of make that consideration.
So, Paris, walk me through this. You made the hard decision to shut down dirtmart.com, which by the way is an awesome name, and go to college. Where did you go to college and what did you decide to study?
Yeah, so I went to Amherst College in Amherst, Massachusetts. I had actually never been outside of the state of California before applying to college. I applied to 17 colleges, didn't really know, didn't really know what I was doing. I knew I wanted to go to small school because I went to a small high school. Got into a handful of them. I needed financial aid to be able to go, and I was fortunate enough to get great financial aid packages. And an anonymous donor gave me money through my school to be able to fly out and visit, the 3 colleges that were my top choices: Bowdoin, Middlebury, and Amherst. And at Bowdoin and Middlebury, it was a gray day and it was kind of cold. And I was like, oh. And at Amherst, it was sunny when I finally got down there. I was like, this is the place for me. And that was about the equivalent, the extent of my college selection process. And so, my mom, when I went out to school, she had said, I can afford to come out either for parents' weekend or to move you in. And I'm like, well, I'm an adult. Why would you come and move me in? Like, I got this. So I bought with my proceeds from Good Start, or excuse me, my proceeds from Dirt Mart, um, uh, 4 one-way TWA student passes.
Oh yeah.
Booked my ticket from Oakland International Airport to Bradley. Had packed all my stuff into a top-loading military duffel bag. Got there, took the Peter Pan bus to Amherst College. Get off at the bus stop, walk in with all my stuff, and there's everyone. There's hundreds of cars around the quad, and kids tearfully saying goodbye to their parents. I'm like, well. I came from California. You can't come much further than that. So these must be the international kids who are getting dropped off. And nope, they were the people who had driven up from an hour and a half
Locals.
away. It was just a total kind of culture clash there. But overall had a good experience. But it was definitely not what I expected.
Did mom end up coming for parents' weekend at least?
She did, yeah, yeah. And
Good.
we had a great time. Her and my brother came out, and we had a fantastic time. But it was just, my mindset and kind of where I was in life and the amount of responsibilities I had versus kind of the other kids who, didn't necessarily have that level of responsibility was stark.
And what'd you decide to study?
Yeah, so I was a double major in economics and psychology, which was great, other than having to make it through calculus, which almost killed me academically.
Hmm.
But I got really focused on that entrepreneurship game based on my experience at Dirt Mart, and basically spent college trying to lead organization and businesses. So I started a summer storage business, which stored students' belongings over the course of the summer. So we'd rent a big truck. We'd go around, we'd
Smart.
pick everything up, we'd store it, and then we'd come deliver it the next year back to campus. And then I also started kind of a nonprofit organization. There was this 6 week gap between first semester, second semester. They called it interim, which was like mid December through January, where the kids who could afford it kind of did their European vacations. The kids that couldn't afford it would stay on campus and do campus jobs for minimum wage.
Yeah.
So I saw it as a good opportunity to start an organization called the Pre-Business Seminar, which helped students from non-traditional backgrounds get into business careers, because we were liberal arts and, making money and jobs was kind of a bad word. So we invited back about 100 alumni during that time, including Harvard Business School professors to kind of do a mini MBA course. And we had about 300 people from all over the 5 colleges in that area come back during that time and, learn a little bit about business. And that turned into kind of a larger organization. All kind of with my eye of saying, I don't have the family background, and I don't know any rich people. So I got to get the credibility myself to be able to raise money and start whatever company I'm going to start. And so let me try to get as much business experience during college as possible. And so I can go to Harvard Business School as quickly as possible after college, get the credibility I need, and launch my first company.
Man, I love your vision and your sort of scrappy, tenacious drive, and it's pretty cool. I'm trying to put the pieces together on sort of where that drive came from, and I wonder, was it Dirt Mart? Did Dirt Mart lay that foundation? You and your friends, like where these values that you're putting forward right now, where'd they come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think I owe most of it to my mom. She grew up in very, very humble circumstances. Was disabled and on Social Security. We lived in Section 8 housing, and resources were very limited. But she always made it happen. Like whatever we needed, we had it. She always found a way. And I think that she taught me everything I need to know about entrepreneurship, that failure isn't an option. You do whatever it takes, to make it happen. And, a setback is just that. And you just keep trying until you ultimately persevere. And that was, so I had that kind of deeply ingrained in me from my childhood. And then with the Dirt Mart experience, this idea that a 16-year-old, 17-year-old could create an e-commerce site and actually make money while he was in high school really kind of showed me that, hey, there's a lot of opportunities here if you're willing to do things that other people around you aren't willing or able to do.
You double majored and one of your majors was psychology. Did that give you the exposure to, human beings and feelings and emotions and sort of how to cater to, people?
Majoring in psychology gave me exposure. I don't know. The dual major was really cool, right? Because learning kind of classic economics and economic theory matched with kind of the social sciences. And I really enjoyed social psychology, how groups make decisions, how people make decisions, what's behind the sales process. I just found it really fascinating and really enjoyed it, and kind of the scientific method as well, and using data to be able to make decisions both in economics and psychology. It was just really intellectually rewarding to learn about those things, and
Yeah.
also thinking about even in Dirt Mart with 3 people, like I like to say business is easy, people are hard, and really trying to understand those motivations and understand people better, I knew would help me be a better leader. And so I really enjoyed that. I don't know how premeditated it was that I, kind of that was my major. It was just kind of what I was drawn to. At Amherst, you have to take 32 classes to graduate. There's one required class, and so you get to pick 31.
Mm.
A major was 9 classes, so that was 18 of them, and I took a wide range of classes, and that was kind of what I was attracted to.
You went on to study also at Harvard, but I'm curious, when did When did Good Start Genetics come about? And well, let's just start with that one. When did Good Start Genetics come about?
Yeah, so I ended up leaving Amherst, doing my applications, and a year later, starting at Harvard Business School. And then I decided to do a joint degree with the Kennedy School, and I got a fellowship to study social entrepreneurship. And so basically, what are the models that allow you to make a positive contribution in the world while also, building a great organization? And so I spent, 3 years talking with some of the most preeminent social entrepreneurs. At the time, it was mainly nonprofit folks like, the CEO of Teach America or, other large organizations like that. And so started thinking about, okay, what's the for-profit model that can really drive social change? And that's
Right.
what initially drew me to healthcare. And so I actually competed in the Harvard Business School business plan competition. I came in runner-up, thank you very much, that year, and started Good Start Genetics in my dorm room. My last year at business school, I did the math. I figured out that based on my academic performance my first year, there was no way they could kick me out. And so I stopped going to class and actually I had a two room dorm room, and started the company with someone who had graduated a year before. So he moved into one room, I was in the other, and we just
So
worked
awesome.
24/7 to get this thing off the ground.
So Good Start, tell us about Good Start. What is it? What community does it serve? And tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's super nerdy, but we're a molecular diagnostic company. So essentially, high level, right? Everyone's kind of heard of the Human Genome Project. So that cracked kind of what the genome, what humans' genes look like, and then it took a while for the technology to catch up to actually be able to take good pictures or good videos of people's genes. So this
Yeah.
was right at the time where that technology had been perfected, but no one had ever actually built a test using that technology that doctors could use. And so we set out to build the technology and build the business plan to be able to use this new technology to do diagnostic testing, and specifically do diagnostic testing but for parents, for prospective parents before they had children, to see if they're at risk of passing on a genetic disorder, things like sickle cell or cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs. So built the test, got regulatory approval, licensed the technology from Harvard Medical School, and ultimately I went around to fertility clinics all over the country and sold them on the value and how much it could benefit their patients, and ended up raising venture and hiring a team, commercializing it, and then ultimately sold that business to a public company called Invitae.
Why healthcare, Paris? I mean, here you're a mountain biking kid from the Bay Area with economics and psychology degree. Where'd the transition to healthcare come in?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just this commitment to never work on or with a business that didn't have a really tangible, positive social impact. And I think healthcare was a really good way to be able to do that. I also think too that just in my upbringing, seeing my mom's medical problems, and her unsuccessful healthcare journey, really motivated me to try to help and try to get into that space. I now know, after I was in healthcare for 15 years, it is very, very difficult to change anything in healthcare. But it was really kind of personally aligned with my values of making sure that I was having a positive impact, and my personal experience of having a disabled parent, who the healthcare system had really failed to try to make some improvements there.
So, first of all, congrats on Good Start. I mean, amazing story, and you were able to parlay that yet into another healthcare company with Ovia, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's like, frustration is actually the mother of innovation. So getting into Good Start and seeing how the healthcare system performed, and especially around women, right? And the example that I love to give is the most of the research on breast cancer was paid for by the Department of Defense and carried out on men. And so there's just this massive disparity in women's health that I got really frustrated with and tried to answer the question, how do you compensate for 50 years of underinvestment
Right.
in research in women's health? And basically came up with this concept that if you could create a consumer platform that captured people's health information and then use big data and partnerships with academic research centers, you could actually massively speed up the rate of discovery in science. And then having a consumer platform, you could take those discoveries and immediately apply them back to improve outcomes for that population. So,
Hmm.
it was with Ovia and built it over the course of 9 years. During that time, we served 22 million women and families. Specifically, we were focused on helping people conceive naturally, have healthier pregnancies, and then during their postpartum period, we had 40% of the new pregnancies in the US were on our platform. Over those 9 years, we had 40 peer-reviewed papers that fundamentally changed the way that obstetrics, fertility, pre and postnatal care were practiced, and ultimately partnered with thousands of health plans and employers to help them improve outcomes and reduce cost for this population. So really, we really allowed me to make a dent in healthcare in the U.S. and help millions, tens of millions of people.
On a personal side, Paris, what were you doing personally to maintain your own health and fitness and mindfulness? Were you riding a bike or were you just running businesses?
Yeah, well, I'll answer another question before you get to it, which is, what is my greatest regret? I was such a California Mount Tam bike snob that when I went to Western Mass, I stopped biking because there was no Mount Tam there, and I stopped cycling for about 15 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then my wife worked at a company called Athena Health that did the trek across Maine every year, and her team was doing it, roughly a 200-mile bike ride over three days. And she's like, "Hey, I want to sign up and do it." And she had her bike that she bought with her own money when she was a Girl Scout at 12. She was riding that, and I had my mountain bike. It was a Gary Fisher Super Caliber circa 1999 with V brakes, and I
Sure.
took the studded tires off and took the first red RockShox Sid off of and put
Wow.
rigid fork on, and we did the ride. And I, probably 200 miles into, getting back into cycling, I realized I'd made a huge mistake, just a huge mistake to stop cycling. And, I've been a, 5 to 10,000 mile a year cyclist ever since. But yeah, I mean, I think when I was getting started, to answer your original question around just what did I do, not much, I mean, especially earlier in your career when you're an entrepreneur, you're 12, 14 hours a day,
Yeah.
7 days a week, and just it was all on the line. And if I didn't sell, if I didn't fundraise, it was, it was not a pretty sight. And so, it was probably a pretty unhealthy time. But that's kind of the name of the game to some extent, unfortunately, especially. And the funny thing is, people think it gets easier, but it actually gets harder because when it's just you and you're worried about, failure, it's nah, I'll be able to figure it out. When you have 100 employees who are counting on you to
Yeah.
be able to make the right decision, to be able to push the right way, it's a very, very different ballgame.
Well, we have to give credit to your wife, I think, for replanting the cycling seed in your head, right? So for the next decade, you're riding your bike more, and you're at Ovia. Eventually, you exited Ovia, right? And tell me about the transition from that to the NCL. Did you do anything in between, or was that the moment that the NCL was born?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, right? Eventually had a great exit at Ovia. We were bought by a large healthcare company, and I like to say, other than the 6 weeks, the 6 weeks is the punchline. I've never worked for a company that I didn't start. And when I tried to work for a company that I didn't start, a almost 100,000 person healthcare company, I only lasted for 6 weeks, and 3 of those weeks I was on vacation. So I'm a true entrepreneur, and couldn't deal with it. And I think my plan was when I left the acquiring company was to take time and ride my bike and think about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But, it turns out that old habits die hard. And, when you sell your company and try to retire, it's not like your personality changes. And so, basically left on a Friday, and started getting really obsessed and thinking about and making phone calls and raising money for the NCL, on the following Monday. So didn't really take any
Wow.
time, just kind of really pushed through. And I think what got me excited, I mean, I was thinking a little bit about it, when I sold the company. This idea of really being able to lean into diverse ownership in sports, gender equity, something that I had been fighting for, throughout my healthcare career, sustainability, and even outside of kind of cycling, just this idea of generations of black and brown boys growing up wanting to be athletes but never wanting to be owners because there were no black and brown owners, or women's sports continually being an afterthought and not being valued at the same level as men's sports. And I kind of think that's the point of sport, right? Is to inspire. And the fact that there's an opportunity to have the first majority, minority, and female-owned sports league in 2023, or one of, if not the first sport that values men and women's contributions equally in a team sport, it's crazy. And I really got motivated about that. And then also just, I believe, hopefully you do too, that cycling is the greatest sport in the world. And even though it's the second most popular participatory sport in the world, there's a lot of people who need to get on a bike, right?
Yeah.
And, I think especially here in the US, there's a lack of kind of that fandom and a lot of other big sports. And I think that means that, there's not as many cyclists as there could be.
You could have just as easily started another healthcare startup, right? But you didn't. Did you consciously think, you know what? I'm done with healthcare for a while. I'm going to pivot completely, 180 degrees, or were there other ideas on the table?
Yeah, I fell into this, and this business idea is literally at the intersection of DE&I and cycling. Like, that's me, right? I'm right in that crosshair, so I couldn't really say no. That being said, I spent 15 years trying to make people healthier, right? And so I actually don't know if this is that big of a departure. Ovia was a consumer company with tens of millions of users, and this is a consumer company, hopefully, eventually with tens of millions of fans, right? Encouraging people to learn about their health and to be healthier. At Ovia, right? Encouraging people to get on bikes, to exercise, to get inspired by our incredible athletes. There's actually a lot of similarities there, and every day that I work on this, I notice there's more and more similarities.
Bicycles can definitely change lives in many different ways, whether it be sport or advocacy or livelihood, health, fitness. There are a ton of parallels
Yeah.
for sure. Well, let's talk about the inception of NCL. And you talked about diverse ownership. What does your team look like?
Yeah, so the founding team, the four founders were all African American men. So it's myself, Mark Wilkins, who's a senior guy at UBS, on the banking side, Randall Clark, who's an attorney, and then David Mulugeta, who's the president of Athletes First and the largest NFL sports agent. So even that, just the founding team and those folks getting
Right.
together, was pretty revolutionary. And then we committed early on to be a majority, minority, and female-owned company, and league, and ultimately that's our employee base as well. So we're a majority, minority, and female-run company, because I think it's
Right.
really important to lead and run by your values. So it's been really cool, right? I mean, we're often on conference calls, and someone will stop in the middle of a conference call because they're looking around Zoom and saying, "I've never been on a call that looked like this before." And it really feels great to be able to have a really bold mission and a really bold vision of the future, but then also just frankly build a company that is that, and people being able to see your values just literally by looking around who's in the room.
Let's move off of the structure and let's talk more about the format
Yeah.
and the concept of the NCL. Tell us, I'm a little familiar with it, and I went to the inaugural one, which was awesome. I can vouch for it, but for the audience listening that isn't familiar, what is the NCL? What's the format? What's the vision? Where are you going?
Yeah. So the NCL is really trying to create a league structure for cycling and really trying to make cycling, I would say, a little bit more accessible. And when I say accessible, I mean accessible to understand and actually become a fan. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting about cycling now. Like you or I, we get it. We know what the difference is between the polka dot jersey, the green jersey, and the yellow jersey, and the most aggressive rider. But for folks that are used to watching football or basketball or soccer or baseball or you name it, it's just a very different set of rules, very different types of competition, right? And this whole idea of like, oh, I'm a fan of this team. When does this team play that team? It's
Yeah.
not a simple thing to answer. So essentially what we're trying to do is take the formats that every other professional sport in the world uses and apply it to cycling in a new and novel way, specifically to make it more accessible, increase fandom in the sport, and target the next generation of cycling fans. Because when you look at what folks want, right? They want to be fans of organizations that mirror their values, hence diverse ownership, gender equity, sustainability, which is really what drives our league. The structure, I like to call it, ain't no one got time for that, right? It's a 21-day bike race or a 4-day golf tournament or a 4-hour baseball game. I don't know if you're familiar, but they just put a timing clock on the pitch clock for baseball to make it shorter because it's too
Right.
long. So thinking about a really punchy format, we have closed course circuits. We target about 1 mile, and every lap counts. And what that means is, first, second, third across the finish line get points, 3, 2, 1 points. And the way it's structured in Miami, although it will change who rides first, but the women rode first, 25 laps. We have a scoreboard that shows what the laps are, at a mile, at the speeds they're going. It's about points every 3 minutes. We also have a pit where you can transition riders in or out. And so there's action every 60 to 90 seconds, either a pit or points. They do their 25 laps, the points on the scoreboard. They leave the race course. The men came in and the points stayed the same. And so if you think about it, it's 2 halves, the women's half, the men's half, and then the men start racing and their points go right on top of the women's points. And so it's the men and the women's points combined that gives a total score for the day. And what was cool at
Right.
the event, and you can vouch for this, there were people who were big time bike racing fans who'd seen 100 races who were actually pretty engaged because they got to see 50 sprint finishes over the course of about an hour and 45 minutes. And there were people who'd never watched cycling before who got it because people get what a sprint finish is and people get what a scoreboard is, and it really drew them in a way that, when you go to kind of more traditional races, they're like, why is the best team in the back? Well, what they're trying to shoot for this, or here's the strategy, or they're waiting for the slipstream. And so it's a lot easier. And the way I like to think of it, the best sports in the world are ones that if you and I have never actually watched it before, we're in a crowded bar, it's on mute, we can glance over and understand what's going on intuitively, even though we've never seen it. But it's complicated enough and there's enough strategy that we can also argue about the outcome on a text
Right.
chain, for hours a day in between every race, and neither of us can be right or wrong.
I can vouch for it. It was exciting. The point system was really interesting. I got it pretty quickly. I was able, I got wrapped up into following the points and the numbers, and I started to strategize and think, okay, if team X gets just one more point, or maybe team Y they're too far away, they can't make it. I totally got hooked. That said, I do have a few questions, and I'd like to poke the bear a little
Yeah,
bit.
absolutely. Go ahead.
You mentioned so at Miami the women raced first and the men raced second. You mentioned that wasn't going to always be the
Hmm.
case. So will you flip-flop and have women race last
Yeah,
at other venues?
that is the goal, and that's what we're going to be doing in our next race in Denver.
Oh, good.
In fact, that the men were like, we just couldn't handle the pressure going into it. It was tough. The women did such a good job, and then they got to chill and watch the bike race, and we were so nervous the whole race. And then we were like, well, what if we don't perform? So it was this kind of cool thing. And actually, the men said, hey, can we switch it up next time? Because we want to give them that opportunity. And I think that one of the most incredible things about the format is when you make men and women equal, they just form a team and they work
Yeah.
together in this amazing way, and they don't really see the gender differences. So that was really exciting to see, and something that I think swapping up who goes first, who goes second is really going to help us promote.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you said that because I was going to actually offer up because I'd been thinking about it since Miami. I was thinking, well, there's first of all, the pressure is intense,
Yes.
but I was thinking that, it is possible if, like in Miami, when the women went first, if the number one women's team scored so many points, the men may not have had to have even raced at all because they would have been so far ahead. The mathematics of your point system, I'd love to get into it because, there's situations where, like in the Tour de France, you can win the Tour de France and never win a stage,
Yes.
which is crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? There takes some getting used to, and frankly, we're a startup. That was our first race. We've been really clear that those are not the rules that are going to be there forever. We always like to remind people at one point there was no 3-point shot in the NBA.
Right.
So
Or 24-second clock.
exactly, right? So rules change over
Yeah.
time. I do think some of the things we're thinking about moving forward, and we have our two teams, the Miami Knights and the Denver Disruptors, and we have 8 other fantastic teams from all over the country who are also racing in our races and have committed to racing in all 4 of them. And so we've been in touch with every athlete who race to get their feedback to how to get better. What are we thinking about? And I think a couple things that we want to try out at some point. One is just having the points go deeper. So right now it's the first 3 across the line. We're thinking, what would it look like if it was the first 5, for example? And then also to get that sprint finish and make it exciting, a little bit more exciting at the very end, have bigger points. Right now it's triple points, 9, 6, and 3. What if it was 20-1, right? Like 20, 19, 18, 17, so on and so forth, to really make it count even more. And then the other thing, that is interesting is how do we deal with the split between individual rider performance and the team, and are there awards or the recognition for specific riders based on their performance? So these are all things we're talking about.
Awesome.
And it's cool, right? Because it's a startup. So I think we got most of it right in the first race, but we can actually get better and iterate this over time from feedback from fans and feedback from the riders.
Harris, I'm curious about this one. So this is the only other one that I'll poke on.
Yeah.
And that is, for the most part, racing is the fastest person, across the line wins the race. And in your case with the NCL, that's not necessarily the case because of the cumulative nature of the point system. Technically it is, but technically it's also not, right? So I'm curious about, would you consider different races within the race so that there could be a pure and simple, the fastest, the person or the team that finishes lap 25 first, they're the winner, regardless of what happened the 24 other laps.
Yeah, I think about in other racing leagues like F1, for example, you have fastest lap. You have 2 competitions, one the team competition, and one's the individual competition. So with our scoring technology and timing technology, we know who did the fastest lap. So there's some things that we can do that are very interesting there as the model continues to evolve. That being said, it's a little bit of a mind game here, but right, like think about that in ball sports, right? And that's the thing that's so interesting because in cycling, we're so used to that final sprint being the thing that decides the winner. But in basketball, it's not the last shot wins. In football, it's not the last touchdown. In soccer, it's not the last goal. And so, there are models in which, you have these points, you go back and forth, and it doesn't necessarily come down to that last second. That being said, it's really exciting. And so how do we split the difference there to make,
Yeah.
if we have an hour-long race, how do we make the first 59 minutes really exciting, but still have kind of that sprint finish that cycling fans, are eager to see. And so, we're going to continue working on that. If you or any of the listeners have any great ideas on that, please send a note. But, I think this idea of, having the same teams and the same athletes compete in a series of races over time, then it starts making sense, a lot more sense about the strategy and the points and who's the fastest and what are you going to do over that time, and thinking about the winner as the most consistent, or the ones that gets the most points over the course of the series, versus who goes the fastest on a single lap or in a single race.
Amazing. I'm going to stop there
Yep.
just because I could go on forever, but I want to give you the platform, and I want to give our listeners too an opportunity to comment. Paris, this is both a business, it's a for-profit business, but it's also something that does something culturally, right? You are inspiring other people to get out and ride their bikes, right? And I believe, if I've done my research right, you've also partnered with an organization to help, move that cause along, right? Which is Wish for Wheels, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, Wish for Wheels is a fantastic organization based in Denver that believes in the transformational power of giving bikes to second graders, specifically in Title I schools. So these are folks that are predominantly, their kids are getting free lunches. Not well off schools. And so every city and every place we have a race, we do a Wish for Wheels event. The first one in Miami was at Feinberg Fisher School. We built 90 bikes for second graders. It was incredible. So our teams came in, we actually built the bikes. The bikes are all sitting there, and they bring the kids in. And the kids are sitting there and they see the bikes, and I got to say a couple words, and I educated them about what New Bike Day was. And so, and then slowly but surely we matched one of our team members or someone who worked at the NCL with a kid, and then, they would pick their bike, and we'd put their helmets on, show them how to do that, and get the seat height. And so I got matched with this little girl, and she was just beyond excited. She was jumping out of her skin. She picked her bike. They're all the same, but she really deliberated if she wanted that blue bike or that blue bike. She picked it. We put her helmet on, and I'm like, "How are you feeling?" She's like, "I am so excited to ride my new bike." And I go, "That's incredible. Like, have you ridden a bike before?" She's like, "Never." So
So
it's
awesome.
literally, we're in the gym and we're teaching all these kids how to ride a bike. And the most amazing thing is she was riding in 2 minutes. And so basically I started out holding the seat and holding her handlebar and helping her balance. And then she's riding on her own. And I'm like, "You're riding on your own?" She's like, "I don't believe you." And so I start clapping my hands. And so she could see my hands run on the bike. And just that pride, was incredible. And her mom actually ended up posting on Instagram thanking the NCL for this experience and saying it's her first bike, and how she's been out there every day since the race practicing and riding her bike. And then the kids who got the bike actually got to do the first lap at the race. So they got to go around our racetrack and get cheered on by 20,000 spectators. It was just this incredible, incredible moment. And despite all the success that we had in Miami, to a person, when we said what was the best thing about Miami, everyone said the Wish for Wheels event. And so, as much as I'd like to say we were doing amazing things for these kids, I think we maybe got more value out of it than they did, because it was just so transformational to see the power of bikes, and also the power of, really committing to these communities.
Such a great idea and such a great organization. Paris, now you'll do that same thing in each city that you host an NCL race at, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Great. And for our listeners, what are the next three cities that you have races at?
Yeah, so our race schedule in August, we have Denver and Atlanta at the Porsche Experience Track, and then we go to DC in September.
So 2 races at the Porsche Experience track.
No, I'm sorry. One race in Denver, and then Atlanta at the Porsche
Oh,
Center.
Atlanta's the
Yep.
Porsche.
And then we're also available to stream on GCN and Eurosport.
Paris, what does 2024 look like if you could, clap your hands or wave a wand? What does the 2024 season look like?
Yeah, well, so I've been at startups for long enough to know that predicting the future is very difficult. We learned a lot from Miami, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that we're changing based upon that experience. Our goal from 2024 is continuing to invest in American, road racing, in the incredible teams, both the NCL teams and other teams, and frankly, continuing to give them world-class venues and world-class exposure and platforms to show how incredible they are. So, in 2024, expect to see more races, more venues, more cities, as well as more teams that are participating in a variety of ways. We also have aspirations. I'm not committing to it, but we have aspirations to have our first international race as well. We've actually
Ooh.
gotten outreach from countries and cities all over the world saying they want to host an NCL race, right? Because there's so many cities and countries that that have massive cycling enthusiasm and so many fans, but maybe don't have the infrastructure to have a classic stage race. So, but they all have 6 city blocks that they can have an NCL race, and people are getting really excited about that prospect.
I love what you're doing, man, and I just can't thank you enough for getting out of healthcare specifically and getting into the cycling world. What are some of the cycling industry hurdles or obstacles that you've experienced or have had to overcome to get this thing off the ground?
It's definitely been a learning experience. I think the cycling industry is very different than the healthcare industry. And so, part of it has just been me and my own leadership and understanding. There's been a learning curve, and I came in and approached it in the wrong way, frankly, not really understanding it well enough. And, through the support of the industry, folks like you, but also the many folks on my team who have been in the industry for a long time, I think I'm at least pointed in the right direction, if not exactly on track. And then I think too, right, we came in as outsiders saying we were going to do this really big, audacious thing that a lot of people have talked about doing, and not necessarily been able to pull it off. And I think there was rightfully so a lot of skepticism. And I think a lot of people went to Miami, thinking it was going to be a 4, and leaving thinking it was a 9 or 10. So we've gotten a lot of inbound from since then of folks saying, "Hey, we get it, we see it, it actually makes sense." But I think that's like, when people say, "Why are you an entrepreneur?" Or, how can you do that? It's like I can envision the way that the thing is going to be in my head, and a lot of people need to see it, right? It's just like real estate, right? If I describe a house to you, you're like, "No, can I see it?" Or a paint color to you, it's like, "No, can I see it?" And now, hopefully, we've kind of crossed that chasm, and folks that can see it and see the format and what we're doing and the positive impact we're having in the cycling community and the broader community, that they can come on board and help us get to where we want to go.
Paris, another obstacle for you must have been, you came in sort of at the height of the COVID bike industry bubble, right? And so that challenged everyone for parts and frames and all that stuff. Was that a huge hurdle for you?
Yeah, I think that was a big hurdle, in the beginning. But it was also an opportunity, right? I mean, there's never been more riders than today. The goal is to keep all of these COVID cycling, folks that started cycling during COVID involved and on bikes,
Yeah.
and not lose that. And I think that was a really big opportunity for us, is that people were looking for bike content. They're looking for bike inspiration, and coming in and seeing our riders and seeing this competition, and it's really inspirational, and it's something that these folks who are new to cycling are really looking for, because unlike a lot of other sports here in the US, at least, there's not that much fandom. And so people want to be part of this community of fans, this community of cyclists, and I think we're really providing that for them.
Well, Paris, we are almost out of time, but we have one last section that we like to end the show on. It's our speed round. I throw 15 this or that's at you, and just to see what you like. You
Great.
ready?
Yes.
All right. Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Tacos or burritos?
Both. Unanswerable question.
The whole category, all Mexican food.
That's right.
Uh, Spicy or mild?
Spicy.
Cold weather or hot weather?
Ooh, neither. Right in the middle.
If you had to ride in the rain or the snow,
Rain.
mountains or the beach?
Depends on the season.
All right. Cities or suburbs?
City.
Cars or trucks?
Cars.
Pavement or dirt?
Dirt.
Gloves or gloveless?
Gloveless.
Clipped in or flat pedals?
Clipped.
Low pressure or high pressure in your tires?
Ooh, high pressure.
Old school.
Nothing is worse than a flat. Nothing is worse than a flat.
Fix it yourself or take it to a mechanic?
Fix it myself. No, try to fix it myself, but eventually take it to a mechanic.
Yeah. Or fix it yourself, think that you fixed it yourself, but you didn't really fix it. You made it worse and then take it to a mechanic.
Exactly right. Why not break it and have to pay the mechanic even more than it was
Yes.
in the first place?
Last question, dogs or cats?
Dogs.
All right. Paris Wallace, co-founder of the NCL and many, many more great things in life. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your story, your journey, the success, and for all you listening, tune in and check out the NCL.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon. See you.